and welcome to another video by Are You Arty Kids. So this afternoon I'm going to be focusing on the humble biscuit, in this case the ginger nut, and I'm going to be doing some watercolour work. So I've just got a reasonable cartridge sketchbook, little tin of paints, some brushes because it's quite small, so I've got a 0, got a 6, and then I've got a big bad boy pencil here. Bit of a rag, obviously essential when you're doing painting work to make sure you moderate how much water is coming off the brush and for cleaning. So remember, brushes have what they know is a capillary action, so it soaks it up just like a sponge. So remember, you know, a brush like this can really load that water up and flood your paper. Just going to use something like a H, just really hard graphite pencil, just for a very, very faint outline, because remember watercolours are transparent, so we can see through them, so I don't want really heavy lines. And I've just got a little, I think these are a dessert dish, just with a little bit of water in. So we're going to do it in the style of a couple of artists, sort of Mae Van Milligan sort of illustrative feel, and also somebody like Joel Penkman, who is also a sort of commercial artist, a bit more realistic. So we're going to just see how we get on. So I'm going to do it sort of life size, so I just actually might, why not, just trace the actual biscuit. And then I'm just going to do some colour matching. Now I'm doing it on a desk and my window is in front of me here, so I'm getting natural light coming in. So that's why it's forming a shadow here. And then I've got all the little crease shadows in the ginger nut biscuit itself. So, you know, if I put a little lamp on, you can see that sort of changes the illumination completely. So we're just going to go with natural light. Right, okay. I'm going to do some colour matching and mixing now. So I'm just going to get my little paint pot and just sort of see what we've got. So obviously I've got nothing. I've got like an ochre in here, which is nowhere near. And then I've got down into these sort of umbers and siennas and things like this. So we're nowhere near on that. So a little bit of water on my brush, and then let's just play around and just see where we are with some of this. And a little bit of into that, and obviously what we can do is get a feel by putting it next to it. It's a little bit dark, so maybe try that. Just warm it up a little bit with a bit of umber. Let's have a look. It's a bit too warm, isn't it? It's quite a cold colour. So, I mean, we're in between these sort of areas really, aren't we? So if I add a little bit of white, maybe to that mustard colour, that ochre, a bit light still. It wants to be quite, it's quite cold colour, or is it not a million miles away? Maybe it needs a little bit of warming up. A bit too warm. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I mean, I'm thereabouts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do wet on wet. So with that, I'm going to make sure I've got reasonably clean water, and I'm just going to flood this area a little bit, damp it. So popping the big brush in the water, just making sure I don't fill it too much, and then so just damping that first. A little bit like an ice skater on an ice rink. So if you put that dry paint, or some, you know, wet dry paint, if you know what I mean, straight onto dry paper, it's just going to stick and leave marks straight away. So by putting that water straight onto my paper, then it allows it to skate over the top and just sort of not really leave too much drying marks. Now, even though this paper's reasonable, it's not watercolour paper, so don't want to over wet it, because remember the paper fibres will break down. If you've ever seen on painting, you know, the little bits coming away, that they are starting to now, and it's almost starting to deform. The paper fibre structure is getting too saturated, so just got to be really careful not to go too wet, and that's why it's important that when you use big brushes, you use a little bit of rag or something just to moderate. the colour. So what I'm using the tip of the brush, obviously detail like with a pen, and then obviously because I don't want to flood that overly. So just see where we are at that point. So this is just a wash, so I'm going to just stop the video now and let that dry for a few minutes, and then I'm going to work in some darker tones. Okay, so we've let that dry for a little bit, even though it has deformed the paper somewhat, so it's not brilliant paper. So I'm just going to put some darker tones on now. So I'm going to use like a yellow ochre, so a little bit less wet on wet, a bit stronger. Using now, I think I'm using the 6 brush. Working it from the inner side to the outside. Using the tip. And I'm going to go into the umber. So, traditional tripod grip. So get control of the detail. The paper's still really wet from that wash, and you can see it's breaking down, which is not ideal at all. Yeah, I'm not happy with this paper at all, really not great. Just add some white. A bit of yellow. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint a bit of a shadow underneath. So it's quite a cold shadow. Put the base tone down first. Use my paper towel, just take some of that water off. And then we'll go just take some black on and take it off. Wash that off. I'm just going to fudge the edge of this shadow with some water, just to soften it a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to stop it at that point, just to let this dry, I think, even more before I can work onto it with detail. Okay, just adding some depth of tone around the outer edge now. So almost dry brushing it on. Then I'll make this even darker, just when that dries back a little bit. I'll go back and add even more to the shadow as well. What I might do is I might just create some texture with something like this. Just maybe depth of tone. Just clean that white. Just make sure use this rag. Get the white there. Trying to get some red tones into the biscuit. Maybe some lighter white tones. That's a bit much, that depth. Because it's quite a rough biscuit, that's. I've just wet that brush, but that's too wet. That's the problem with big brushes. Get them too wet. Oops, on the camera. Just soften it out with the white a little bit. I'm trying to get some texture. And then I'm going to pick out with this tiny brush again, this black shadow. It's not really reflecting much colour in this shadow actually. So I'm going a lot deeper than you'd expect. But then I am going to fade it out. Go even stronger because I want a really sharp edge to it. Just using a 0 brush. Too high then, I think. Good thing about this biscuit is because it's rough, can be a bit shaky handed with it. And obviously I can just bleed that a little bit. So So we're getting there, aren't we? That texture's helped. What I might do, so just because that biscuit's got a really definite edge, hasn't it? I'm going to have to paint this definite edge to it. So using the zero brush again. It's just a difficult one to paint because it's such a mottle of colours. But just like we've done with the black, what we're going to do is just try and get a really nice line to it. So it can be a bit shaky hand with it because the biscuit is not perfect. Remember, things don't have outlines in real life as such. So I'm going to have to blend that away into more tonal. So I can do that. Just take all the paint off the brush, and then I'm just going to, using a damp brush, I'm just going to try and wet that paint. And blend it in. To the biscuit itself. So I've still got a really sharp edge to it, but I haven't got an outline. And then what I'm going to have to do is I need to fuzz this shadow now, don't I? So I'm just going to use quite a bit of water because I want to bleed it. Like a shadow would fade. So take the paint off, just water again. Not too much that you flood it, but you just want to bleed that shadow off. It's trying to look like you've not painted it. Just get a little bit here. And then too vigorous with that one. Could probably save it. Just oh dear, that's not good. Wanted pure white paper there. Dash. Okay, might just have to put a little bit of black in there. Let that dry. Okay, so we've got a nice clean edge now. It's sort of popping off the page a bit. I need to work on this depth of tone around the edge, just on this bottom here, so get that 3D feel for it. So I think it's going to be an umber. It's quite red, isn't it? So maybe an umber with a red. How deep is it? How high up does it come? Comes up to about there, I think. I knew I'd do that. A little bit of paint where I don't want it. And then I'm just going to have to, I want to bleed that edge now. Do I think it's... definite enough. I think it still wants to be a bit darker. Yeah, because I want to do all this before I get the cracks on. So I'm just going to stop the video there and have a think. Alright, I think what we're going to do is just keep working on... Ooh, that's a bit much. This side, I think. Still not happy with this. I'm trying to dry brush so I don't end up with a definite edge on the top, because it does fade in. It's not great because I'm taking the paper fibres away from it, but I am trying to dry brush, which is not brilliant, but sort of paper is disintegrating now, which is unfortunate. So I could do this on nice watercolour paper. Yeah, I've lost a bit of paper fibres now, which is unfortunate. Right, I think what we'll start to do now, because I can't overwork that anymore now, is I'm going to start to put some of these little cracks on. So that's going to be quite a strong colour. Using my zero brush, I'm probably going to put it on with, I'm just going to try a pure sienna. Because it's like a hole, so this is great if you've got a shaky hand. So we're going to just get straight in there. Maybe try and hold your brush a bit more upright for this, so you get the tip. Quite a big crack here. Obviously it doesn't really matter for accuracy. Make sure you don't get it too watery. That's quite a deep crack in places. So using the tip at different angles, flattening that tip out, and I just want more of a bigger crack. And it's quite nice because it's a bit more natural. So I'm just going to get some of these. You can just see on the side around some of these cracks, sort of that one there sort of opens up. On the side. I might just almost take everything off, and then don't know if there's anything left on it. Just want to get as much paint off as possible, so there's hardly anything on, and then I'm going to sort of almost like dry brush, mottle some of these darker tones. Still not red enough overall as a biscuit, but That's not too bad. Right, I need to give it some highlights on these cracks. So I've got like the top highlight here. So what I might do is I'm going to mix up like the ochre with a white. So I'm just going to stop for a sec and then mix that up. Okay, we're back. Just mixed up a little bit of white with that ochre. So I'm just going to try and put now some of these highlights in to the top of the cracks. If I can, just with the top of the brush. And then I'm going to blend them away, I think. A little bit too bright. Maybe just use some on this side of the biscuit as well. Blend that in. See what ones that look like with that sort of red. Oh, it's far too wet. And that white. It's almost like a pink, so I might add that actually. Oh, it's a bit much, maybe. Where's that pinky tone? And I'm going to move all this around in a minute. Okay, let's wash all that off. Let's dry my brush. And then just dry drag some of that paint, which will mix with the paints underneath. I don't want any of this to stand out really. Who'd have thought ginging it would be this difficult to do? That don't look too bad, does it? It's even worse. I don't have to add I might, if my eyes are good enough, I might just add a bit of black into these cracks, just with the top of the brush. Okay. It'll probably be easy to actually paint through the camera. Just the really deep underhang sort of thing of the crack. Put that shadow edge back in. Now it's dried back. So it's still a bit more red than mine, but we're not a million miles away from what I wanted to get, just with a simple, cheap little Mage brushes, watercolour tin, couple of cheap brushes, bit of paper towel, an old dessert thing of water, and some average cartridge paper. So this is very much trying to go for sort of illustrative feel here, which I think that's not too bad for what's that taking us about 15 minutes maybe. So that's watercolour, ginger nut, done.